All right, everyone. Welcome again to another episode of Secrets from the Saddle, all things cycling with your host, Sylvie, and my amazing guest who's sitting in Norway, Stephen Seiler. Is that correct?
Oh, you're going to have to start over now because you mispronounced my name.
No, Seiler?
Seiler.
Seiler.
It's German.
Stephen, I'll go ahead. Stephen Seiler. How's that? No?
No.
I thought I'd put the Quebec
It's
spin on
not
it.
French German. It's just Stephen Seiler. It's American German.
Welcome. And I have to say a big shout out to Joe Friel, who recommended that I get Stephen on the podcast. I'm going to give you a little intro on him. Anyways, there's a lot of stuff that you can find out, but Stephen grew up in the United States, so he is, he's an American who's living abroad, doing his coaching and training, which is super cool, and we're going to dive into that. So he earned his doctorate degree at the University of Texas and was Stephen Seiler. PhD, has lived and worked in Norway for the last 25 years as a university teacher, researcher, and leader. Never forget again. But yeah, I want to thank you for being a guest. Joe recommended that I should ask you, so thank you very much for. He's like, you should contact this guy. He knows a lot.
Well, that's nice of him. Yeah, I know Joe. We've met. I know his son through Training Peaks and some talks I've given for Training Peaks, and I wrote the foreword for Joe Friel's latest book on indoor cycling, I think.
Oh, so, for Ride Inside?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wrote because I do a lot of riding inside right now.
Yeah. So we all these days, right?
Yeah, but I think my percentage is pretty darn high. Inside versus outside, because I'm kind of a geek, and I use it as a laboratory as well as the training mode. Plus, it's just super efficient for me. So, there's often snow and ice on the road in Norway, so that's another excuse. So,
yeah. I suppose you're still deep in snow up there right now.
No. It's spring now. I live on the south coast of Norway, so it's 50 degrees C today, or 50 Fahrenheit, 10 degrees C, something like that. So it's feeling like spring. I've planted zucchinis and peppers and that, but on inside, getting ready.
It's like, wow.
No, inside my house, and then so I'm getting in the gardening modus. So
that's one of the things that I have on my schedule for this week is my mom recommended Brussels sprouts was a good one to get started inside, because it just takes, I grew them last year I bought them, but they took a very long time to mature. And by the time I harvested them, they were still like mini little balls on the so I'm like,
I'm not gonna grow Brussels sprouts. That's like, I don't know. I hated those when I was a kid.
I know, like nobody likes
torture to be made to eat spinach and Brussels sprouts.
But they have an amazing amount of protein, extra protein, I should say.
Oh, good grief. Eat some chicken.
That was the first time I'd ever grown them. I was like, how is this going to work? Like, you buy them, the little balls, like, how does this really work? So anyways, it was interesting to watch them grow throughout the summer. I was like, oh.
That's how it was for me with zucchinis, because I didn't know anything about them. Zucchini squash, and I'm no garden guy, but I'm kind of learning. And
everybody's becoming a gardener.
Yeah, the lockdown, I was just growing tomatoes before that, but then I had to expand my garden because I didn't have anything else to do. Anyway, but the zucchinis once they start growing, it's incredible. It's like during the day you can watch them grow, So
you just start giving them away to friends. Like those ones, they're completely resilient. I've planted zucchinis and I've had them chomped down by deer at least twice in a season, and they'll still come back and like produce enough.
That's my kind of plant. I like spicy food. Yeah, I had to give away some zucchinis last year already. So this year I'm going to be, I'm in production mode. So
That's right.
anyway, so yeah, it's spring is happening here and it feels good.
Excellent.
But we're in lockdown. It's unfortunately we have this variant, this British variant or English variant of the COVID-19. It's kind of taken root here in Norway, and we've had to really increase the measures. Going more into much more of a restricted situation. So, for example, teaching is now
do you have
100% digital.
The vaccine in there happening as well?
The vaccinations are started, but they're not, they're not flying. By the time, with me not being particularly in the high risk zone, other than getting older, it may be December before I get my vaccine. I don't know. I seem to be expendable. That's the general message that I'm getting from the government is that I am an expendable.
Are you clamoring to get your vaccine though?
Clamoring. I don't think
are you like, yes, I definitely want to get the vaccine? Or are you like, I'm kind of hold off?
There's a bit of there's a bit of trepidation because I do have a pre-existing condition. I have a clotting disorder, this Leiden factor genetic thing where I found out I need to take a blood thinner, and I do. To avoid risk of blood clots, and blood clots are associated with COVID-19. So that's why I have a tremendous respect for it. And there's one vaccine that has in Norway, it looked like maybe there was an increased risk of clotting incidents. It may or may not be true. It's very tough, and the statistics are troubling to get your head around, but anyway, so it's obviously it's not like you just run and jump and say I can't wait to get a shot of some a foreign agent that will come into my body and we'll see, assume my body will handle it well, and there are some side effects, but that's normal with vaccines. You get a flu-like little period, you get headaches, for some people do, but I want to be able to travel again. I need to, I want to be able to get out there, do what I do. And so I think vaccination will probably be an important aspect of having some kind of a COVID passport or whatever to travel.
I hope not. That's what I'm afraid of too. And I'm like, I'm really kind of hesitant like you. And I'm like, but I don't want it to be like, you have to be vaccinated to do this and that, and if you can't, well, that's too bad. Like, you have to, like, I don't like that feeling of being forced into something that I'm not completely comfortable with.
Yeah, well, I don't think any of us do, but I think it may be the airlines are just doing they're going to do whatever they can to bring back a sense of normality and that people feel safe to fly, because if not, they're going to go under, so.
I know.
So they're ready to use whatever means.
Yeah, I know. They put a lot of like, you can leave, but when you come back, you have to do all these things. And a lot of people like, I don't know, it doesn't make it worth it for me. But so let me just introduce myself to you. Again, thank you. Sylvie, I'm here in Quebec, Canada. So I'm and so
you don't sound particularly Canadian.
Oh, what do you mean Canadian? You mean Quebecois?
Yeah, what do we call you? You sound American.
No, I'm from Quebec. I'm an English Anglophone from Quebec. I do speak French.
Quebec, you say? Okay, not Quebec. Okay.
Quebec.
Yeah, I have some friends. I've been in Toronto. I've been in
Montreal.
Brisbane. No, I haven't been in Montreal, but I've been in Toronto, and I've been on Victoria Island. I've been in Vancouver. Flew through Calgary, but yeah. So in the last few years, I finally visited Canada a bit.
You have to go to Montreal and then come up and visit the capital, Ottawa. And that's where I am.
But as long as you guys don't make me feel stupid for not knowing French.
Oh, don't worry about it. No, it's not that much of a separation here. Like, English is kind of, it depends where you go in Quebec, but you probably won't go to those areas. But so,
I'll just stay among
like,
my
in the
people.
depths of Quebec. So not where you'd probably typically travel. But yeah, so I have a women's cycling club here. I've been cycling coaching and riding for like 20 years. And I started this podcast like 2 years ago, 2018, just doing some Facebook Live interviews. And then I really wanted to start this. And so I just kicked myself into getting rolling and making it official in December. So I've done 50 interviews. Well, sorry, I'm up to 50 episodes, and you know, I was able and fortunate and lucky enough to get Joe, which was Joe and Jim on my interview and my podcast. He must have been on my LinkedIn tree because I sent a Christmas, you know, New Year's, Happy New Year's to everybody, and he responded. I was like, oh my gosh. And yeah, I was like, yeah, Happy New Year to you too. I'm like, would you be on my podcast? He's like, yeah. And yeah, and then he referred you, and so here we are. And so, like, my background is I work with a lot of beginner masters cyclists here through the club, and my vision or my focus is to work towards closing the gap in cycling, but at the junior level, you know, like at high school, like really putting together. I'm in the process of kind of putting together an idea to launch like a program to target female cyclists at the high school level and start building up females in cycling at, you know, at a younger age, which is the big gap. 13 is kind of where they drop off because they hit high school and things like that. So
Sure.
that's kind of my my focus these days.
Okay.
Slowly but surely, but we should start the podcast. Stop talking.
Yeah,
So
well, I don't know when it actually starts anyway.
I don't know. Well, you know, I might just add all this banter, but I haven't done the intro yet. And so is it Stephen or Stefan or?
Yeah, just Stephen is fine.
Stephen,
yeah.
Okay. I put the French twist on it. No.
That's...
But I am going to start with your story on how you got into cycling. So you're going to have to dig deep back to like...
Oh yeah, no worries. I got that
back
one
to
down.
like, I don't know, you're 13, 9 years old, say, or whatever,
No,
wherever it
yeah,
started. Because
Yeah.
that's what I really like to go back to. And if you want, I was listening to your TED Talk. I listened to it like twice. I was able to get to, that was the recent one that you sent in your email.
Okay.
And we could talk about that. No pain, no gain. I love that concept because a lot of people still use it. And I loved what you were talking about with regards to training in the green over the red, and you know how, I mean, we could dive into that if you want.
It's your podcast, so
No, but this is, I'm just
no,
thinking
I
about
do a
things
lot
that
of
we
work
can
on
focus
training.
on.
Yeah. So I can tell you my baseline was that or my background for you or for this podcast was that, look, yeah, I've done a lot of podcasts. I got to be honest. Triathletes, I mean, people who work with triathlon, cycling, running. And I've said yes to, you know, podcasts from Australia to India to Norway to Europe. But most all of them, I'm trying to think, not all, but 90% plus have been men. The men have been leading the podcast, and the audience has probably been predominantly men. And so, and it's the same on my Twitter account with 14,000 followers. It's just, I don't know why, you know, because I know that there are lots of female endurance athletes, there are lots of female cyclists, but there's an underrepresentation in the discussion.
I agree.
So that's why it was pretty no-brainer if Joe recommended it, and you you were working with women in cycling, and I thought, okay, that's, you know,
Do you want to talk about that? I don't, like, where do you,
yeah, for me, training is training, but of course there are some issues. I have a daughter, you know, that I'm her coach, and she's the only athlete I coach day to day. So I am sensitive. She's 22 now, coming up on 23. But she was a dancer for 10 years, competitive dancer, and so I've followed her whole, you know, I was her coach when she was a soccer player, and so I've been there for years. But yeah, I do have some sensitivity to some of the gender issues that may or may not be relevant in a training situation.
That's why us women are here to help. But that's interesting. Yeah. Okay, let's get started. Before we start like chatting about everything and not getting it started here, I might just bring some of that stuff and add it, you know, but okay, so let me just so I'm just going to go through just a little bit, like a couple of the sentences that you have here, not through the whole thing, but
whatever. I don't, believe me, I'm pretty low key on all that stuff, so don't worry.
Okay, cool. Well, I do want to give you some sort of an intro. So we are going to dive into a lot of, well, we have a couple topics that we are going to talk about. There is a TED Talks that I want to showcase, but we're also going to maybe take a swing at, you know, females in cycling, which is a topic because a lot of these podcasts are, you know, kind of male dominant. Maybe you could agree. And, you know, maybe we'll just dive into a couple of things, but you can look at Stephen's, his website, science-cycling.org. He has some interesting stuff there. I was currently also looking at one of your YouTube videos that you made in April of last year, talking about COVID and indoor training. Lots of things we can talk about there too. And then we could just sort of tie it all in with the no pain, no gain kind of thing to indoor cycling, and how maybe we're all kind of maybe tad overdoing it on indoors because we have free time to sit on our trainers, and Zwift. I'm just going to use Zwift as an example because I'm on there, and I know Stephen is as well, that it provides a massive amount of opportunity to ride like 24 hours a day. So yeah, you can, I was just looking at, you know, group rides, races that are like 3 a.m. in the morning, like they're every hour on the hour. You could be racing somewhere, doing something. And let's just dive into your feelings about that as a, you know, a science coach, and your background.
Sure. Well, my background is, you know, I grew up in the United States. I played American football, ran track and field, you know, did all those things. And my entry into cycling, if you don't count my Schwinn banana bike and all the you know, the
you had a banana bike too?
Oh yeah, with the banana. Oh, absolutely. You know, so I had all that stuff, and also the big wheel and different things like that. But the cycling came, I think, as it does for some, as a rehabilitation issue, because I tore a patellar tendon, and I was coaching with kids, and I slipped on wet grass and tore a tendon, had surgery, and I used a bike for rehabilitation.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know how it happened, but anyway, I ended up 6 weeks after that, I was at a race, and you know, just a local citizens race, borrowed a bike and got third in this little local race, you know. And so then I thought, maybe given that I'm skinny and I'm never going to be an American football player anyway, and you know, I might as well try some endurance stuff. And so I did some cycling. I did road cycling. I was doing my master's degree, and I was training on the bike. My first bike was a Cannondale, and that was when Cannondale was brand new. This was probably 87, something like that.
Oh, wow. That's when I got my first bike too, like 89, 90, 91.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Was this your introduction to cycling? Like, I forgot to ask, like, your start,
yeah,
like,
of course, yeah, in any kind of real way. I mean, good grief, growing up in the country in Texas and
yeah,
Arkansas, gravel roads and
yeah, right.
bicycling was at best, you were just some nerd that, either you were a kid when it's okay, but once you hit like 12 or 13, there's no way you're going to be caught dead on a bike, because you want to be driving a car or
Yeah.
something, right? I was driving a car at 16. Everybody does in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So bikes, were not cool. They weren't a transport medium, to be honest,
Yeah.
of any real meaning after you got into your teens. So but the cycling thing came in because you had Greg LeMond at that time. I was watching when I was a master's student at the university. I'm studying exercise science. Well, that's when he is coming on the stage in the Tour de France and winning the Tour de France and beating Laurent Fignon in that amazing time trial that he wins. He was down like 50 seconds and he wins by 58. He wins the Tour de France by 8 seconds. And his opponent from France was just never the same. I mean, he was so crushed. but Greg LeMond, that was the very beginning of some aerodynamics issues where the riders were figuring out. He was using a little an extender bar, and he was getting into a reasonably aero position, and wearing a decent helmet, and Laurent Fignon is basically sitting up like he's driving through Amsterdam or something, and
So, Panier.
yeah, and so it was the beginning, and it was just intriguing and interesting, and yes, so then I got into cycling, but then I started my PhD program, and cycling just sucks time. You do use a lot of time, or you can, you can use as much on it as you choose. You can use time on your bike, you can use time on the road. There's just many ways to use a lot of time. So I was running, I didn't have it. And so I thought, this is tough. And anyway, I got convinced to try rowing, because there was a rowing club, and I ended up becoming a rower and rowing competitively for 10 years. And I'm also tall. And so rowing suited me there too. Cause in cycling, I was just this huge, everybody wanted to just get behind me.
Behind you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, let him be the tractor, So anyway,
As
so
a
in
woman,
rowing,
we like guys like that.
yeah. So I was in rowing, we're all tall. And so I fit in there and enjoyed rowing just wonderfully. My best man at my wedding was a rower, and I competed there for 10 years, but then I, got injured. I had a surgery on my shoulder. And so, as you get older, you just start driving slalom around your injuries and things that happen. And just in recent years, I just came back into cycling a bit, and then Zwift came along, and it just appeals to me because I'm busy. I like data. I'm a scientist, and Zwift, I can download my workouts, and and I can use so yeah. I think I have been on Zwift 860 hours.
How many? Well, when did you start on Zwift?
December, I believe. I want to say it's December 2018. So,
okay. I think that was probably
right
when it was
about so 2019, 2020. Now I'm in my third year of Zwifting. Yeah. So
well,
yeah,
do you have a Tron bike as well?
Oh yeah, heck yeah. I have
the Tron bike and then the other Tron bike.
I've had but I don't even use the Tron bike. It's so passé. I mean, I moved on.
You don't change the colors on it?
No. See, that's just silly. That's just, no. It turns out, but geeks like us, I don't know if but we read the cycling comparisons in Zwift, and we have found out that the Tron is not actually as fast as it may look cool, but it's not the fastest bike in your garage. So I ride the Specialized Venge S-Works, for example, pretty much all the time. It's fast.
See, I don't have that option yet. I'm just still at level like 15.
I'm at level 50. So I am so far ahead of you that you know I can't even see.
I know.
I can't even see you from where I'm at in my level.
I know. I know. I got it. You have to have
just
started like back then to be there. Don't worry, I'm going there.
no, it's fun anyway. So
I'm not
yeah,
gonna
and
ride
I'm
outside
doing
the
a time trial tonight. I got a time. I'm recovering from 2 broken ribs, but I'm 15, 16 days out, and I'm starting to get healthy
What
again.
happened?
uh,
This is gonna be good.
Yeah, it's stupid.
Or is it silly?
You know what kettlebells are?
Oh yes, I train on kettlebells. Yeah.
Yeah, me
What'd you
too.
do?
It's great. I've got kettlebells at home, and I've got the just like iron kettlebells straight from the Russian special forces. You know, they're the most crude looking you can get.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing push-ups, you know, holding the handles and doing different core stuff. And I've done this years. I've done it 1,000 times. But just one of them, I'm piked up, and one of them slipped. It rotated on me, and I've always thought, well, I don't want to break my wrist if this ever happens, you know. And so in my mind, I was just thinking about my wrist, but my body weight just fell full bore onto that iron ball, right on the ribs, just right on the side of my, and I just felt it. I heard the crack, you know, and I, you know, you get this immediate shock. You know, like, what have I done? And so, yeah, and immediately my brain just said, "You just broke your ribs," you know. So, yeah, it was bad.
Wow.
Ribs, I can tell you,
I can see it.
It's painful. It is rib, and everybody I talk to that's had a broken rib just says, yeah, it just hurts because the ribs, they move, you know. Constantly when you breathe. Plus, if you cough or something, you'll pass out from the pain, and if you any kind of movement,
sneezing.
yeah. Oh my gosh, I managed to avoid sneezing for 10 days, and then on the 10th day I sneezed. I almost blacked out. It was just so painful. Still after 10 days. In fact, your brain almost won't let you do a full sneeze. It just stops. It just paralyzes it doesn't let the sneeze actually go through, you know, because it's that bad, you know. Anyway, so yeah, but I was able to get back on the bike reasonably quickly. In fact, I could ride the bike before I could sleep in a bed, actually. You know, I couldn't sleep supine for 2 weeks, but I could ride after a couple of days, 3 days, really slow, really easy. You know, and then
get the stationary bike out.
Yeah, well, I have a trainer. I've got the Tax Neo bike. You know, I'm geared up. Let me tell you, I got my own. I've kicked my kids out of their bedroom. I kicked my teenage son out. Well, he not really, but he likes to ham it up. Anyway, and so I took it over as my cycling room. And so.
Yeah, I was watching your video. Okay, you guys have to go to his YouTube channel. But I was watching your video from April, and you were making, like, you're showing different pictures of pain caves, and you know, like the deluxe pain cave, you know, like anyways, the view, the TV, the windows, and then you got the kitchen, and then you got the ironing board, which is exactly what I did, was go and grab my ironing board. Has never had that much action in like 15 years. You know, it's like up, down, over here. It's right over there. And and I just had to laugh out loud because like
it all works. Like, and even some of the top cyclists in the world, when they set up for Zwift, you know, it's ramshackle. I mean, they're just doing whatever, you know, they're in their garage or so, you know, if you can push on the pedals, it just doesn't matter. And I think that's a great equalizer, you know, because when you get on that Zwift platform, everybody's kind of the same. It really doesn't matter, you know. So that, I think it's nice, and I enjoy. I do, you know, a lot of times I ride alone, you know, but I also do group rides and races and try to find disciplined groups, like the Germans. They're pretty disciplined, so if they say they're going to be at 2.5 watts, they stick to it. Whereas the Dutch, they just go off like a herd of banshees, and there's no control at all. So that you know, you just, after a while, you just know, okay, this ride is going to be crazy, and you just live with it. This ride is going to be controlled, and so you know what you
Or maybe
want.
that's what you're looking for. I'm looking for the one that's just going to give me a little bit of a push over the nice, slow and steady kind of pace.
Yeah. So you can find every personality in the group. The group dynamics are different in different group rides, and people are different, and we're all tempted by, and this kind of moves us into the issues that I think I work a lot on training, which is how you distribute your intensity, from day to day. Do you go out every day and just do medium hard, because you feel like you need to really work hard, but you've got limited time? And this is kind of this black hole I've talked about, where you kind of, as our brains just tend to, the default will be, because of time, because of various mechanisms, we will tend to end up riding at kind of medium hard pace or threshold pace, or right at our red line. There's different ways of describing it, for, I don't know, 45 minutes or an hour, and then we'll feel pretty good and we're tired, and but if you do that every day, you stagnate really quickly. And elite performers, good performers, that's just not what they do. They and that's been my discussion, whether it's through TED Talk or through published research or through working with elite teams and whatever, is to try to understand what can we learn from the best, and then how does it apply to us, regular people with jobs and so forth. And that's been one of the big issues. And the reality is that you really shouldn't go out every day and train as hard as you can or push as hard as you can. You've got to find a flow in your training, a rhythm in your training, and that takes some discipline. But when people do that, they get better, and they stay healthy, and they have fun, so those are good reasons.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your TED Talk, the one that we're going to share with everybody in the description. And I want you to elaborate more on why, training in the green, let's just say that zone 1, zone 2 is, and doing, I always call it the 80-20 rule. 80% endurance, zone 1, zone 2, 20% intensity. So if you set up like your training hours for 10 hours a week, then 2 of them should be, your higher intense, and then the rest should be just straight up endurance. Would you is that how you would explain it, or do you have another way
well, to be honest, Sylvie, I'm the guy who said this the first time. The way back in 2004 and 2006, I published papers where one of them, or both of them, I used terms. One of them was polarized training. Yeah. And the other was this distribution of, at that time, I think it was more like, I didn't exactly say 80-20, but it was 75-25. It was, in that ballpark. But, and then Matt Fitzgerald wrote the 80-20 running book. He contacted me and he says, look, I'm basing this book on your research. And then of course I get the book, and he mentioned me 45 times or something in the book. And so that was flattering. And then his second book was 80-20 triathlon. And so that came from research we did here in Norway back in the early 2000s. And the polarized concept. And of course, it just, much to my surprise, I know it just kind of took off as a term, and of course, as these things happen, anytime these terms are used, they also get misused, misinterpreted, so that's just part of the territory. But both polarized training and 80-20 training I don't think those terms were ever used before we published them back then, but that's been 15 years ago, more than 15 years ago.
15 years ago is probably about when I started training and racing, 2005. And began coaching, and I don't know where I got that, but it certainly makes sense to me, just talking through with other athletes, say like ultra runners, they spend a massive amount of time doing like zone 1 shuffles, right? Like
Yeah.
just it's a shuffle. but they go long distances. Like I have a good friend of mine, maybe you've heard of him, Ray Zahab. He's an ultra, he's not even ultra runner anymore. Like he does huge expeditions, like thousands and thousands of kilometers, whether he's running, skiing, fat biking, winter, desert, tropical. Like you should, yeah, he's pretty amazing. And I just remember him, you know, like one of his friends asked him for a training program. He's like, here, zone 1 for 2 hours, like hills, flats.
Yeah.
And he's just like, what? He's like, yeah, do
well,
it.
and that's
It's
the
boring.
thing. And it's not true just for these ultra people. You might think, oh yeah, well, they're just weird. But the reality is that in fact, the first groups that we looked at really closely were, for example, rowers. And rowers, their competition distance is 2,000 meters. It takes them 6-7 minutes. So it's just full gas, you know.
Yeah.
But the training, most of the training is at a much lower intensity, you know, low stroke rates, and they're just building that aerobic machinery. And then they do some high intensity interval training. Then we looked at cycling, we looked at running, we looked at cross-country skiing. Cross-country skiing races are incredibly intense. You know, 10-kilometer races for females and 15 for men. And they take under, you know, 30 minutes or less, but they are doing hours of this extensive training, you know. And so what we saw was this pattern that it was kind of not, it was independent of sport and largely independent of competitive distance, you know, that there was this pattern emerging of this about 80%, about, as you say, 8 out of every 10 sessions, 7 to 8, you know, and by hours, if you're looking on a pulse clock, a heart rate monitor, it might be 90% and 10% if you're actually looking at time in zone with heart rate. That, you know, 80% of sessions, 90% of time in zone is at an intensity that's below that so-called first lactate threshold. We often call it talking pace or green zone, or I won't call it comfortable. I mean, you're working, it's deliberate, it's work, but it is sustainable for a long time.
Yeah.
Particularly once you've gotten comfortable, you do it, you know, used to doing it. You know, even I'm kind of an old sprinter type, tweener, middle distance-ish person, and now I can do 3-4 hour sessions even on Zwift at this pace. So that's what we're talking about. It's doable for a long time. And then we're gonna throw in some spice with some, you know, various kinds of high intensity sessions. They can be threshold, they can be VO2 max intervals, they can be, you know, sprints. There's lots of ways to do that. But if you get that balance right, then the data just shows time and time again that the athletes stay healthy, and they tend to, you know, you get continuity, you know, because endurance training is about putting together hundreds of workouts. You know, if you think about it, you know, I often ask people when I give a talk, how many workouts are you going to do this year? And if you know, because we often are so focused on the workout today or the workout plan this week but I said, just back up, get up in the helicopter, lift yourself up and look and say, how many times am I going to do a workout this year? And I'm just you know, I'm 55 and I'm just doing, you know, just messing around, but I still will be training about 300 times this year, right? 6 days a week. I train 6 days a week. Of course, elite performance training twice a day, that number may be more like 500, even 600 times a year. So the point of that is to say that given that, if you're doing something hundreds of times a year, it better be sustainable. You better come into a pattern that is sustainable, because it does matter. If you do that, you get continuity, you get long-term development. And that's usually what we see is when athletes have great seasons, what they say is, well, I stayed healthy this year. I didn't have a major injury. I was able to do that preseason build. I got the volume in. Those are the kinds of things they'll say that made their season. They won't say, oh, well, I had that epic interval workout back in March. It was the key to my whole success. That is never what they say. What they say is the big picture, the continuity, the you know what I'm saying? The stability of the training, stacking it week after week. That's what gives them, what leads to breakthroughs and
Yeah.
things. So that's an important lesson, I think.
Well, I didn't get on Zwift until December, like very first time. I was watching all my club mates get their trainers, get on, start training them. Like, I felt a little FOMO, which I'm sure everybody does. They're like, oh my gosh, everybody's training. They're going to be so fit in the spring. I better get on board and And so, but the thing is that as the coach, I'm like, I have to do this in a smart way that is going to be effective for me, instead of just getting on my bike and riding, doing all this interval stuff, racing, fast groups, like no downtime. I'm just completely exhausted. And I'm just sitting there, well, we will see what the spring holds for those girls who are like that, right? Like, and I'm like, and then I actually picked up Joe's book, Ride Inside, because I was feeling this little anxiety about it. And I'm like, I know I should jump on this bandwagon because it's not a trend anymore. And I will need to effectively train myself this year. I've never really done it. I've always taken the winter off and trained a little bit, mountain biking, downhill skiing stuff. But so I listened to it. I got the audio version. And I'm like, wow, he made me feel comfortable about getting on Zwift with a purpose, and I was like, and everything that I coach was kind of in there, like the pedal stroke form and everything he was talking about, and the inefficiency of sometimes being on the trainer, like how it can make people inefficient. Maybe we should talk about that. I don't know if you want, but so anyways, I got the book and I was like, because he was referring all these pages, and I'm, so I need to get the book so I can kind of read through it myself.
Take notes.
And it made,
so you can highlight do you highlight with yellow or?
Yeah, I went through there. There's a couple areas, but at the end, he had like workouts and things. So I got it and I got on, and then I'm like, okay, the coaching in me is like, this is what I need. I need to organize myself, have a certain amount of endurance base, certain amount of harder workouts, and schedule everything in. And so I feel that I did a good job for myself, but I'm watching a lot of these girls like be tired, be fatigued, you hear this stuff, my heart rate's never, like it's never elevated or it's too elevated. I just like feel exhausted. And
they're just pushing too hard. It's just the recipe. If you want to make an athlete stale and stagnated, and then all you do is just have them train medium hard every day, and that for an hour. And man, Zwift, that's what it's designed for. The default that will tend to happen on Zwift will be that you'll tend to, every day you'll end up finding some silly race or some 1 hour group ride. And the group rides tend to, at least the guys, and apparently the girls too, they tend to just start half wheeling each other. And pretty soon it's all hell breaks loose. There's no discipline at all. And so, and everybody forgets what the point of the ride was, is, I had a interval session yesterday. Today is just going to be an extensive, and I actually should probably try to get 2 hours in, because that would be good. But do they do that? No, they go bananas. And so, and then they say, well, I'll do better tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and here we go again. So it's just, you fall into this rut. And we discuss this a lot, and this happens, of course, in sports in general, but Zwift is just particularly conducive to it. But when athletes get, I think when they manage to leave their ego at the door, in this case, the door to the pain cave or whatever, if you can do that, then and get on the bike on Zwift or anywhere, but get on Zwift and say, you know what, today it's 2 hours. I'm going to be listening to this podcast I've been wanting to listen to, and the sun. I'm going to be looking out the window, and I'm chill, and I'm riding it at a comfortable pace for 2 hours. I'm going to drink. I'm going to make sure I've got the fans going, and I do not care if some upstart dude cycles past me today. I don't care. Now tomorrow I will kick his ass because it'll be a race. But that's tomorrow. Today, and that's what we see with elite athletes. They're very good at this. They're disciplined, and if you manage to do that as a regular type on Zwift, if you've managed to put that ego away on the days when you want to just you've got a plan, you'll get better. It works, but it does take a bit of emotional self-confidence to say, I don't have to chase every squirrel that comes by. That's what dogs do, but I'm not a dog. I've got this well-tuned brain that is supposed to be able to handle all these temptations.
I think so here's something I did, Steve, is on Thursdays, I did a 2-hour ride, but I set myself up with a workstation. And so I have my and it's serious, like 2 hours I would sit and I would work and I would listen to like Clubhouse or a podcast, and I would just get like little mundane stuff done that I do. Some research or maybe a couple emails or, like just stuff that I could do in this position while keeping a 90 RPM, which was my only focus, very low, and, Zwift in the background. And that was my Thursdays. So that was part of my endurance ride. And and so that's why
if it works for you, that's great. It's a little bit too much multitasking for me, but
I know.
I'm like, that I gotta say that kind of falls into some gender kind of characterizations.
Let's talk about that.
No, I feel like that is a great way for me to get in trouble.
No, I got the idea from actually another female who does that. Well, she's a chiropractor, and she uses it as her time to like do her reports in the morning. And I remember her telling me about this. I'm like, what, really? And I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. But just one day.
I wish I could do that. But yeah, well, that's and I remember when I was training at the University Training Center, the fitness center, and I was always captured by, there was always this group that, had the step machines and the treadmills, but particularly the step machines. The step machines were very popular among the female students and the women in general. But they would almost always, you got the step machine, you paid a lot of money. It's got all these bells and whistles, and it's got dots, and it's got numbers, and it's got the calories and the heart rate. And what would the average female user do? They would take a magazine and just cover. The first thing they would do is
all the data,
cover up every number. And I was like, what? How could you do that? Because I would be fixated on the data, of course. And I think that is like
different ideas. We're just here for the booty burn.
Yeah. See that, and so that is like, at the most gross characterization. Just a generalization. The males on Zwift, males training in general, will tend to be more kind of like numbers oriented. They want to see their heart rate. They want to measure stuff. They're going to be fixated on the power and things like that. And the technology of the bike and all this crap. And then the female athletes, the female exercisers will tend to use distraction approaches. Like you're doing something else that is taking your brain away from the task or the fatiguing aspect of the task. And these are the two typical approaches to exercise. You either focus and you kind of channel in and listen to every muscle and every movement, or you do the opposite, which is to kind of distract yourself, right? And both are good alternatives. I think the distract yourself alternative is great on those long, easy days.
Yes, and that's the only time I do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I am full focused on like what I'm doing, because if I'm going to do a workout, I will pick a workout, like office Zwift. And so I go in there and I am intentionally working out over when I'm just riding, or I have one group ride that I go on. And yes, remember you were saying like it's a hammer fest. All you need is one person pushing a little bit, and it doesn't mean male or female, because I can tell you that nobody wants to, everybody wants to have that little extra edge in front. I know, like I'm like a little sprinter, so like I will always go for that the person who sprints away, or I'm looking for the word for it. Yeah, so I will always be on that wheel.
Right.
And I was just like, wow. And before you know it, you got like, and I just look at the time like, oh my gosh, are we gonna continue this for another half an hour until the end of the ride? Because I'm like, I better just like pace myself. But but yeah, I totally, those rides exist.
And well, the other thing is of course we all, and I've done research using very standardized training sessions, 4 times 8 minutes, 4 times 4 minutes, 4 times 16 minutes. The number of publications that are available in the literature comparing all these different magic formulas. And
what's your favorite?
I don't have that. You can't get me to do it, say it, because there's really it depends on where I'm at in my brain and what I'm trying to achieve. And really what I want to go to is to the reality of it is that I've found using Zwift is that, look, if you let it happen organically, you can get a fantastic training session. Sometimes I'll just, you use, just like in a race. And that's one of the interesting things. If you want to train cyclists to race, they have to be both proactive sometimes and reactive sometimes. But one thing they never do is they don't follow a recipe, because races never happen that way. They don't ever evolve as 6 times 3 minutes of hard work with the warm up, and it does not happen. And so we prepare our athletes with these very structured workouts where they get used to, I've got 10 seconds left. Well, in a race, you don't know when you're done. You don't know when the push is over, or the bridge is completed, and so that takes a different mentality that is more open to unexpected things, and it's more organic. And the push may be 30 seconds here, it may be a minute here, it may 10 there, it may be a 4 minute, so I call it organic interval training. And that is a wonderful, that's real, that's what happens in races, and that's what you're preparing for. And I think you can do that and do it with satisfaction on Zwift. You can use what we call affordances, use what happens in the ride. But what you do is you go into that ride and say, today's going to be a hard day.
Yes.
This is a hard session, but I'm going to let it evolve. I'm going to bridge to different groups. I'm going to use the climbs. I'm going to do some sprints. And when you put that all together, you've got a hell of a workout. You've gone through all the gears, you've gone through the zones, you've done a lot of high intensity work, right? And it's been more race relevant in a way, because you start to get an understanding of what you handle, how many seconds you can have the afterburner on, and come up in some high power, and then shut it down and not get kicked off the back of the group, because that's all what it's often about is burning your matches and conserving your energy, and distributing it. So if we want to teach, youngsters how to do this, since I think sometimes it's good to be more organic in it and not always super structured with the hard workouts.
Yeah, no,
does that make sense?
I agree. Oh yeah, totally. And I think, like you said, those rides are like, you go into with an intention, and you let it run out. And because I was just thinking, when that group ride was always on Sundays, and I'm like, okay, I'm probably going to use this as a harder, intense workout. But you know what? I would look and see who showed up, which is kind of like the start line, right? So I'm like, she's going to be pushing the pace, and she's going to be, and then I'm going to be obviously reactive to her. So I'm like, this is going to be a hard workout, because otherwise, if they're not there, it doesn't happen. You know what I mean? Like, there are some girls who just like, the pace is pushed from the start. And I'm like, and I'm always going to, for me, that's just me, I'm always going to be reactive to that. And I'm always going to be on their wheel, and I'm going to be at their shoulder the whole time. And we will sprint for those sprints all the time.
Right.
And I was always trying to get the upper edge all the time. And so I just know that ride is going to be from gas on from the beginning to the end. And that's just it. And then there's some rides that are just harmonious. And I'm like, wow, this is really nice. Easy
and that's
ride.
Great. You know,
because she didn't show up.
But yeah. Well, for me, I mean, I've gotten to the point where if it's a group ride, then I can control myself. If it's a race, it's a race, you know. And but I use races as hard sessions, you know.
Oh, for sure.
And that's the other thing you have to remind people of is, obviously, you know, when you interject a race on Zwift, it's very tempting, but you got to count that as one of your hard sessions.
Oh yeah.
Don't think you're going to do 2 hard interval sessions and another race, or maybe 2, then you're going to quickly burn out. You're going to quickly be in that state where you can't get your heart rate up and things like that. So, you know, when you're doing your accounting, race equals hard session. You can choose structured interval session or race, but they're both, they count as a hard session, you know, and you just decide.
And then you do the 80-20 rule, and you're like, okay, I'm going to have a nice ride the day after, or maybe it's going to be recovery day or something, or I'm going to do some yoga. You getting into yoga?
That would just not be good. but I train my daughter, and you know, and we've worked through this a lot, and basically, as a rule of thumb, and she's a good runner. I mean, she's 1:16 half marathoner, 34 10K.
Is she a cyclist, or are you training her?
No, she's a runner.
Oh, okay.
But it's the same. It's endurance is endurance. I mean, the principles are the same. And what I was going to say is, you know, she handles 2 hard sessions a week well, but not 3. You know, when she's tried to do a little extra, but 2, she'll do 1 long run at low intensity, and then but 2 kind of interval based sessions that even those are a bit different in character. But what I was going to get at is that, as just a rule of thumb, we never schedule 2 hard sessions without 2 days in between that are more low intensity. And so it may need to be 3, but it's never less than 2 over a long period. You can do it periodically, but over the long time frames of training, you know, that just creates air in the program and recovery time. Now, that doesn't mean those days in between you're not doing anything. Those are extensive. They can be 2-hour rides. They might be 3-hour rides, you know, but you're not really putting the pedal to the metal on those rides. You're not getting that big stress response and so forth. And so just as that, you know, my daughter is the one that used the term for me. She said, Papa, I'm feeling the flow of my training. And that's a good thing. You know, the training is flowing is the way she describes it. And I think that's what we're looking for, is trying to find at an individual level that rhythm, you know, that says, about every, you know, if I do a hard day, I go 2 days easy, and then I'm kind of gearing it up and I'm ready to go hardish again, you know, and I'm in a rhythm that works. It's sustainable, and my body responds. And one of the ways you can check that is if you do a hard interval, you know, a full-on 20 or 30-minute race on Zwift, there's plenty of them, you should be able to hit your max heart rate.
Oh yeah.
You know, you should be able to get up to your max heart rate, or very close, plus minus a couple beats. And if you're finding that you're just not getting there, even in a really short, these criteriums, if you're still not getting there, then you're tired. You know, your body's trying to tell you the brakes are on. you know, because if you do one of those races and you say, well, I didn't even get past, I was at 91% of heart rate at the end. Well, then the brakes are on, my friend. You need to, you know, give yourself some rest, and then you'll be able to mobilize that last gear. It's a very common thing that will happen with athletes. I even had one time I got an email from someone. They said, hey, I started doing this polarized training, and my maximum heart rate has gone up 10 beats. He says, I think I've been chronically overreached for 10 years. so
Thanks
like,
for finally listening. No.
Yeah, I thought, well, that's great. You know, I'm sorry you had to wait 10 years to figure this out. But yeah, you know, your body, the sympathetic, parasympathetic balance can get shifted. We've got lots of research on it where you literally will, you know, become kind of parasympathetically hyperactive, and the brakes are on, and the body's just not, it's kind of keeping you from turning on full gas. I don't know if we can think of it as a protective mechanism or what, but at any rate, what usually solves it is easing up, taking a bit of rest, you know, and chilling out, and then the energy comes back.
Yeah. So with that, no pain, no gain, I like this in your TED talk. No pain, no gain, or is this too much pain for very little gain? I like that tagline.
I grew up in the no pain,
so did
no
I.
gain.
It's like,
you know, I mean, you know, run through the wall. If you're playing football, you know, the coach would just send us, and if you weren't suffering, then you weren't working. And what I was just trying to say is, look, these heroes, your great athletes that you admire, that you've watched in the Olympics and so forth, that's not the way they train. They can't.
No.
They just can't train at full gas red line every day. It doesn't work that way. The body has rhythms. I mean, and it's the same with horses. I mean, you can, every type of animal you see, the one, if you want to stress them out, if you want to kill them, you just create this you know, chronic medium hard stress, and you will first freak them out, and then they'll eventually die. So it's a common pathology. And so athletes have figured this out. They have to have a rhythm. They have to have a, you know, we talk about pacing in races.
Yeah.
It's the same. You have to pace yourself in your training. You have to find this pace that allows you occasionally to do the sprint, but also allows you to come back down, settle, because you're in the long. In the long term, it's always a marathon in the sense that training is the long haul. You know, so it's your training is always a kind of an ultra or marathon event, if you think of it that way. And so you're not going to sprint, you know, the start of a marathon. That's not going to be a good tactic, you know. So, and it's
yes,
neither.
I think everybody's done that at least once. Don't go out hard. Take it a little easy.
Yeah,
give it at the end.
Pick your battles, you know, and mentally be, you know, in any kind of tough workout or race, it's often, I don't know, between 50% and 70% of the way through the race. That's where this doubt, this conversation kicks in your brain, between you and your brain and your body, where the body's starting to say, man, this is just not fun at all. And the brain is saying, yeah, but I've already made a commitment to it, you know, and then you have to, you know, you have to decide what are your comebacks going to be when your body starts revolting in that critical phase. Because, you know, and if often when you get past that phase, if you get past that phase without giving in, then you have a good race, and then you start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. You see the finish line. You know, but so it's very common the way our brains work and act and deal with stress, with pain, in these things. And so, but you can't go there every day. You just can't.
No,
you know,
I think of that expression, and you do hear it a lot, and it's kind of, I'll say it's kind of like I don't like an ego. It's like, you know, you can push more. Like, you should be feeling pain right now. And I think of them like, you know, I was thinking about like when I've kind of used it, or maybe I said it to myself, right? And I'm like, you know, should I be feeling it, or am I pushing hard enough for me right now? Like, can I push more? And you know, that's like no pain, no gain, you know, like if you're not pushing harder, then you're not making those gains that you're been working towards, or this is part of the process of training. Like, you have to feel in pain all the time to get those gains. And I was just thinking about, like, you know, what you were saying, and I'm like, gosh, I really, you know, need to um, find something else to say other than
Yeah,
that
well,
expression,
it's
because it's kind of
doing the
old.
work. Training is boring at times. I mean, it's doing the
Oh,
work, you know. Yeah, I mean, and you got to be good at being bored if you want to be a good endurance athlete. You have to
yeah,
embrace the suck, as they say in the Marines. I think is that you're going to do runs or rides that aren't. There's nothing exciting about it. It's just getting out there, getting on your bike. It's cold, it's damp, and you ride for 3 hours, and you've created a stimuli for adaptation. You've done a good job. There were no PRs, no Strava records, no anything. But it's part of the process.
yeah,
And that being able to understand the importance of boredom, because if you're not bored in a good way, and you know, in other words, just nothing is very meaningful is happening in this ride other than I am just getting up to 68% of my heart rate. I'm just burning fat and I'm, you know, adapting. If you can't embrace that, then you won't have those long-term gains, you know, because hey, in a race, I would like to be in a situation where I'm actually saying, you know what, I'm 2 hours in, there's 2 hours to go, and I feel good. Do you
yeah,
think at that point I'm going to be thinking, oh shit, I should be feeling bad right now, I need to do something to make myself more tired? No, you're not going to do that. You're going to be thinking, fantastic, the other guy's struggling, I'm still within myself.
yeah,
And that's what that training process is all about, is I want to be able to go farther into the race, deeper into the race, without starting to encroach on my limits, because I want to have a place to go up in my head in that final 30 minutes or hour or whatever it may be, where we're going to decide. Now we're going to decide, you know,
yeah,
if it's an hour and a half Zwift race, it'll come down in the last 20 minutes. If it's a 6 hour race on the road, and you know, one of the classics, Flandern and Rund, you know, it'll be the last hour. But it always comes down to that, and how have you managed your energy utilization? How have you,
yeah,
you know, have you kept yourself under the radar? Have you well, that's training too. It's the same thing,
yeah,
you know, right? So great racers probably also are pretty good at being cool, you know, when they have to. I don't know if you know the guy, Cadel Evans,
yeah.
Tour de France winner from Australia.
Mm-hmm.
He's about 42-3 now. He's retired. I've actually ridden with him on Zwift. That's my claim to fame. And
Whoa.
Zwift, yeah, in a group ride with Cadel Evans. But what I was going to say is, the story was, because I was doing a little bit of work with a team he had been on. I met some athletes that he worked with, and they told a story about how, you know, the youngsters at a training camp, they obviously they're gun-ho and they want to demonstrate, you know, that they deserve to be there. And often it's training camps or some climbing stuff, and they'll use climbs as an interval workout. But Cadel Evans just wasn't pushing those hills very hard, they said, and they couldn't understand it. They, you know, Cadel Evans, he's the greatest, and he's not working very hard. And so I'm not going to ask him. You ask him. No, you ask him. I'm not going to ask him. He's Tour de France. And so finally, one of these youngsters says, "Okay, I'll ask him." You know, and well, Cadel, man, you know, we know how good you are, but it doesn't seem like you're really pushing on these climbs. You know, these intervals. He says, "Well, mate, you know, it's a long season, and we're in January,
Oh,
and
geez.
I got to be at my best in July. You know, I'm pacing myself. You know, and so it was just kind of trying to give them an understanding of this is
Yeah,
every day is not a race, my friend. You know, and so, but for those youngsters, every workout was a proving ground. They felt
yeah, yeah,
compelled
yeah.
that they had to demonstrate, they had to test themselves, they had to prove themselves. The young lions, oh boy, that is dangerous. That gets them, that's what gets you in trouble. Whereas Cadell had gotten past that, and he didn't have to prove anything.
Yeah.
But so he could just think, what do I need to do today to stack, to add up to a sustainable progression towards when the audience will be expecting me to perform. That's kind of the prima donna. We use that term prima donna as it's a negative term. Oh. And I learned from I was at a seminar where the Olympic Federation of Norway was working with the opera, and they were using this terminology, and they said, look, the prima donna has a bad rap because often they have these specific demands and so forth. He said, but the reason the prima donna has those demands is because, number one, the prima donna, there are expectations. They are the main attraction. That's why they call them the prima donna. And the audience has huge expectations, and they feel the pressure. That's number one. And number two, they know precisely what they need to perform under those conditions. Right. Well, that's the elite athlete as well. It's not arrogance, or it's being very tuned in to, I know what's going to be expected of me on these occasions, or when I'm facing this opponent on a smaller scale, and this is what I need to be ready for those occasions. And I have to be true to that, and I can't be distracted by the little small dogs barking at my heels along the way, because I'm worried about the big dog I'm going to be competing with in July. And so that's kind of that prima donna mentality. It's not necessarily a negative thing, but it often gets kind of construed as negative. Oh, you're just a prima donna. But in reality, that just means, oh, you really know what is expected of you, and what it takes to get to be ready. So in reality, that's a great way of being described if you're an athlete.
I like being described as a prima donna.
Well,
to live into it though.
Yeah, but we just have to remember where that term comes from. It comes from the opera. It comes from the woman that walks out on that stage, and when they walk out, everybody's suddenly silent because they know big things are going to happen. This is where the magic happens. Well, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I love that, and I also love the fact that you have to get comfortable with being bored. I've heard it from a lot of my guests, especially like Joe and Jim, embrace the boredom, because that's part of what training is about. Like, you can't expect to have be watching Netflix when you're outside, or be, being entertained all the time. And I like that. I don't set myself up too much for watching things. I do set up podcasts, and I do watch a flow sport race, and I just get into being like part of the group that's racing. It's more like the visual, like I'm training and I've got watching my data on the side, and I'm listening into something that's motivating, and I've got the race in front, and I'm not a Netflix binger when I'm on my bike.
No, I can't do that. Partly just because I've got my technology set up, but I watch these avatars. I try to kind of feel like I'm in the group, and then I may be listening. If it's an easy day, I'm listening to a podcast or some easy music. If it's a race, then I've got my rock and roll legends from the 70s or whatever, or the 80s. We all go back to what we listened to when we were 17, I think, is in those situations. And so I think we all have to just find our rhythm. But boredom, in so many different settings, I've heard this, that boredom is not a bad thing, because boredom is the beginning. It's the start of creativity. It's the initiator of innovation. It's, teaching children to be bored, to accept boredom and work through it and figure stuff out instead of being entertained. We just got too much of a problem of expectations of entertainment. So it's not just in training that we see this, but boredom is okay, you know, and it creates a baseline that makes you more appreciative of those moments when something exciting happens, or when you do take off the brakes and really ride hard and push your limits and so forth. So you get that, you create that you know, this undulation that the body and the brain seem to need. We need variation in the load. I think that's relevant for working and so forth. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to work super hard and then take a break and play a video game or whatever. That's just the way our brains function, or they function well when we allow that to happen, you know.
Yeah, no, I like that. And God, you just said kids, and I don't want to take it off to a whole, but I was just thinking of my kids, you know, oh, I'm so bored. I'm well, you got tons of things you can be doing right now. Like, why the
Look,
boredom?
I grew up in the country. We
Yeah,
didn't
me
have
too. On the
any,
farm, like
I didn't even see a computer till I was 18 in college. You know, I didn't even know. It was so funny
I think
because I
that's the
was,
best. I'm
yeah,
like the
and so
same.
I was outdoors fishing at 7 o'clock in the morning before the bus came. Had a laboratory under the stairs. I went out and looked for crawdads and things to explore and look at under the microscope. So I don't get this whole boredom thing. Is kids need to be just exploring their universe, exploring their world. But unfortunately, I would almost say, unfortunately for the kids today, they are just bombarded with stimuli, and they've not gotten to experience the wonderfulness of being lost in a task. You know, like, you know, going out doing something as ridiculous as going and scooping up some pond water and putting it under the microscope, thinking you're going to discover new organisms. You know, you're 12 years old. And well, of course I didn't, but I had so much fun. And the hours just drifted away, and my parents would have to go find me under the stairs because I was just absorbed in all this stuff. Well, because there just really weren't that many competing signals. You know, there was not much else going on. So it was easier, I think, to kind of get lost in discovery, in in your own discovery. Not that it hasn't been done 1,000 times before, but you were discovering it for yourself. And that can also be true in training. You know, it's just getting lost in the discovery process. Ride alone, run alone sometimes, just and be bored, but tune in to your breathing, tune into the rhythms of your body. There's so many different rhythms you can lock into and explore. So I think that's another thing that we should be doing more of, and is, you know, even when I was coaching, I would use this, like with rowing, I would try to get the junior rowers. I said, I want you to listen to the sounds of the boat as you search for speed, as you try to accelerate. When do you hear the boat? When you know it's at speed. It's, you know, it's there's I said, can you hear the bubbles that emerge, that you start to get bubbles on the water surface? You know, now this is
you're giving me chills.
But that's,
I'm
you know what I'm
visualizing
saying, that is tuning in to all the signals that are provided to us if we just care to listen, to see, and that can help us understand how our bodies are responding, how the bike, how we are connecting to the bike. What is what is happening with when you go into the hill? How are you breathing? What's the delay between the demand of the hill and how quickly your body is responding to that with an increase in breathing? Can you anticipate that? Turns out you can. So there's different, you know, we can play with all of this and become little kind of, I won't say scientists, but you know what I'm saying, to explore how our bodies work. And sometimes the best way to do that is when you're alone and you're not distracted. You know, you can just kind of get inside that. And of course, Zwift's a good place. You can do it on Zwift because you're inside. The conditions are more controlled. So I use it as just to experiment. And I'm a sports scientist. I'm a physiologist. I've been doing this for years, and yet I still at this age, by doing it every day, I still discover interesting questions. I still get questions that come into my mind because I'm sweating and working and seeing how things happen into my body every day. So I don't think that should ever stop, you know, and even though I'm all alone and I'm sitting for 3 hours writing, people say, oh, you must be bored out of your mind. I'm not really, because there's a lot going on up in here, and you know, it's not like an empty shell.
I probably should get off the bike. It's been a while.
but man, there's so much, you know, we got to use our brain, let our brains let them unlock and do what they it's like, I don't know, sometimes the brain, it's like a horse. It's like that's got all the, you know, you take all the bridle, take the saddle off and let the thing run. Let that brain go, you know?
That's how I feel on my, anyways, we could talk like that's how I feel on my bike when I'm by myself. I'm just riding as fast as I want or as slow as I want. I just feel I always think about horseback riding because I used to ride on horses when we were at our farm. And I'm like, oh, it's just the freedom. But but still going down a hold of it. We're at the top of the hour, and I could just continue. Like when you were talking about the sounds like of the boat, I was just thinking like the sounds of racing and the cues you listen for with your riders around you. You know, the changing of gears, the breathing, the accelerating.
The breathing is so fundamental in sports. And whether it's MMA, boxing, you know, what do they do between the rounds? They'll say, he's breathing hard. You've got him gassed. Go finish him. You know, so it's.
Are they looking tired?
Yeah.
Do you think you can take them?
In famous moments in cycling when they're looking at each other and trying to get a feel for how tired, how are you feeling? We're climbing this mountain together.
Yeah,
you know,
you're looking.
Are you, you know, and you're trying to capture signals that say, take him now. He's pretending like he's under control. She's pretending like she's got her act together, but she's on the ragged edge. If I push 10 watts harder, if I take it up, I can drop her. You know, that's all this stuff. And it's fun, but it's part of, you know, using all of your senses. And you got to tune them in. You got to tune into them in training, or they're not going to be calibrated in competition. So I think that's just, and what I always say to people is, look, every workout, there is something to be very intentional about, even at low intensity. You know, even if it's today is a 2-hour, 3-hour easy ride, you're not going to, you know, you can say, but today I'm going to focus on, and then what is it? Is it drinking? Is it, you know, being consistent with cadence? Is it, you know, there's different things you can work on within the intensity of the prescription that make you a better rider. You become a you know, more tuned in rider, so you can give yourself homework to do during these boring rides, you know. And that's one of the things that I, you know, because cycling, if you're going to do road racing, for example, you've got to manage your hydration. You've got to manage your energy intake. So practice that, you know, don't think it's going to happen automatically for you in the race if you never are tuned into it in practice, in training. So that's something you can train. You train your body, your brain and your body to drink, you know, and know that even because thirst is not going to be sufficient, you're going to have to almost use a clock. When I'm doing Zwift rides, I just tell myself every 15 minutes, drink, you know, because I sweat like crazy. So I just, you know, if I wait on my thirst mechanism to do the job, I'll be too far behind. I'll be quite dehydrated. So that's practice. You got to practice.
All right, guys. Well, with those last words of wisdom from Steve, we are going to bring it to an end. This has been amazing. Oh my gosh, we're at the top of the hour. And I know you guys don't see the hour because like we've just been chatting, but we've been chatting for a long time. We've been chatting about a lot of stuff. I hope you guys took some great nuggets of wisdom from Steve and maybe applying it to your training going forward, wherever you are in your training plan, wherever, like when you hear this. But please remember to subscribe and put on your notifications and share this with others who you think will really benefit, or even not. Like, this is just great listening. And Steve is an amazing wealth of knowledge. We'll have to have you back, you know, after the summer and just do like a quick analysis as to how the training's affected the summer stuff and what you're up to with regards to your research and things like that. So love bringing people back just to, you know, follow up as what's going on. So remember to put your notifications on so you don't ever miss an episode from Secrets from the Saddle, all things cycling. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Steve. And it's been
My
a
pleasure.
massive pleasure.
Thanks. I'll come back later and we'll chat some more.
Yay! Hi, welcome to another episode of Secrets in the Saddle, all things cycling, with your host Sylvie Dow and Stephen Seiler. So Stephen comes from, he's originally from the US, and he's been based in Norway for the last 25 years, where he's been working on research, and he's a teacher as well and a leader. He is the past Vice-Rector of Research and Innovation, past Dean of Facility of Health and Sciences at the University of Agder in Kristiansand, Norway. Sorry. Seiler has been internationally recognized for his research, publications, and lectures related to the organization of endurance training and intensity distribution. And we're going to talk some about that. We're going to have some fun today, and, you know, no numbers. We just like to keep it simple and, you know, just talk about feelings and things like that. So welcome. I hope you guys enjoy our discussion today. Have a good one. We'll see you there.